exciting part. Over the next 70 minutes or so, we will hear from a talented panel who will share their insights and ideas. We'll begin with some preset questions, and then we'll open up to questions from the audience. So I'd like to welcome our panelists. Thank you so much for taking the time to join us today and share your experience. My name is Molly Maloney. I work at Making Waves Academy, supporting with data, assessments, and compliance. And I've worked at a number of other schools in the West Contra Costa area. I'm also the mother of two wonderful 13-year-olds who go to school locally here in West Contra Costa. And I will be facilitating today's session. So to our panel members, in 30 seconds or less, please tell us your name and what brings you to this panel today. And Natalie, you're first on my screen, so why don't you get us started?
All righty. My name is Natalie Walchuk. I kind of come wearing three hats. One, I'm the ED here at Go, and so always excited for the work I do there. I'm a mom of three kiddos, two in college and one in high school, who are very different learners from each other. And so I have kind of that lens. And I was a teacher and a school leader for nearly 20 years. And so having worked in the K-12 system for a long time, I come with that perspective to this conversation.
Great. Craig.
Hi, everyone. My name is Craig Means. I'm the Associate Dean of Admissions at St. Mary's, Associate Dean of Transfer Admissions at St. Mary's College of California here in Moraga. We're just located here in the East Bay area. Although I oversee transfer, I've worked on the high school side of things as well. So got a wealth of knowledge. I'll basically be representing independent colleges. Kind of like others were sharing, I went by way of a community college to an independent college myself. And I've been in liberal arts higher education for 35 years. Also the father of, kind of like Molly, two 21-year-olds, so twins that have gone through the college process as well and are both at California independent colleges.
Thank you.
Thanks.
Kyle, please introduce yourself.
Hi, everyone. My name is Kyle Williams. I work at Sonoma State University. My position is Outreach and Recruitment Counselor. I can talk to you all about the CSU system, or I will secretly try to convince you to go to Sonoma State University specifically. But the CSU is a really good program. It's the largest in the state. You know, there's 23 campuses, so there's a lot of different programs they offer to help students. There's a lot of ones that are universal to all the CSU, so I can talk about those in general. But yeah, in general, I was a student at Sonoma State University, and I worked in campus housing during that time as well. And yeah, I could talk about my experience as a student, working in housing, working in outreach. So if anyone has questions that come up today or later, feel free to ask. But yeah, I'm happy to be here. Thank you all for having me.
Thank you. All right, Barbara.
Hi, I'm Barbara Sabadini. Hi, everyone. I have worked now for Sylvan Learning for about 17 years. And before that, I taught middle school in inner city San Francisco and in Oakland. So I'm happy to answer any of your tutoring, academic enrichment, all those sort of fun things, those sort of questions that you may have. I've had the pleasure of working with so many school districts all over the Bay Area and seeing many, many different schools and lots of kids from West Contra Costa. So I look forward to meeting some of the families as well today.
All right, and finally, Ibris.
Thank you. Good morning, everyone. My name is Ibris, and I am the program assistant at the First Five Center. So it sounds like I'm on all the way the other end, age-wise, for the little ones. So we are a resource center out in San Pablo, and we focus on parent and child classes as well as resources for the San Pablo Richmond community, and a lot of mommy and me classes, daddy and me classes. I also have a 12-year-old out in Richmond in one of the charter schools. So happy to hear from everyone here as well. Thank you for having me.
Thank you, everyone. It's exciting to have this preschool all the way through college range of experience here. And as we're getting into our academic enrichment discussion, why don't you guys elaborate a little bit more just on what is your background related or connection related to academic enrichment programming, either personally or professionally? And why don't we start with Barbara this time, since you're right on point with academic enrichment there.
Well, we do some academic enrichment. We certainly do a lot of academic intervention. So, but we have done both. So in terms of academic intervention, we do that all across the Bay Area, either in our private centers or within the actual schools. We bring that in. We've also done fun things like STEM work with kids. We've brought that into Boys and Girls Clubs across the Bay. We've done enrichment work with college prep students, so high school students, and doing some writing activities and preparing them for being in college, the ACT, SAT, which we're not doing a lot of right now for obvious reasons, but we used to do that a lot in the past. So sometimes, you know, I've worked with families who their kids are pretty much at level, but they actually want a little bit of additional boost. And so we've done that sort of work with families too, where we've taken the student where they are, even if they're above, and gotten them a little bit further. So all that sort of thing is what I've done.
Thank you. Craig, why don't you tell us either about academic enrichment programming or programs you've run or participated in as a young person?
Yeah, I guess coming from the standpoint of St. Mary's, for us, we'll be, you know, in connection with our high schools or high school programs or CBOs, we'll do application workshops, common application workshops to help students navigate the journey. We'll meet one-on-one with students. Since I work very closely with transfer students, I oftentimes will meet with transfer students at the community college level, creating academic pathways on how to navigate the journey through the community college to a school like St. Mary's or the independent college sector. And then I'd say here, I guess, in linking it to academics here, the journey that our students have to go through, they don't have to go through alone, right? So every student here gets a faculty advisor, no matter if they're declared or undeclared. And then every student also gets at St. Mary's a success coach. So you've got two people guiding you your four years here in your academic journey, you know, a faculty advisor who can talk with you about the academics and, you know, major choice and why you might choose a certain major, as well as your success coach who kind of takes that holistic approach to help students balance things like time management with their academics or relationships and things like that. So really, I guess with that, it's just knowing that students don't have to go through this journey alone.
Great. Who else? Natalie, why don't you, it's kind of getting the whole range here for this introduction piece though.
Absolutely. I think in my school leader hat, when I ran a school, we did a lot of thinking around both intervention and acceleration or enrichment. And so trying to create flexible schedules and programming, although in full transparency, I learned the most when I worked for Barbara. So I spent a year working for her. And she really taught me a ton about how to really understand individual child's needs and drive forward success, whether it be trying to catch up or push forward. I think there's just a really interesting set of work around how do we meet students where they're at and build custom programming to get them where they want to go. Because for every kiddo, the journey looks different. I think I probably also learned a lot by being a mom, especially to my youngest, whose journey just looks a little bit different in through school. And so really learning a lot about how to make learning enjoyable and accessible and compelling for him as he's thinking about where he wants to land at the end of the day. And so I think that there's an opportunity. As a youth, I did youth and government through the YMCA, which was like the nerdiest, best thing to do. But I learned I know so much about US government. I got to like hands-on do it. So I think like my growing up favorite academic enrichment was youth and government through the YMCA, like hands down the coolest thing. I got to be a senator and hang out in the state capitol building on the actual Senate floor and like pass a bill and learn about stuff. So for me, I'm really inspired by what is interactive and hands-on learning opportunities for kids. And that helped form some of the ways that I led schools down the road. So I'm passionate both personally and professionally about it.
Kyle, why don't you tell us about your connection to academic enrichment programming?
Sure. Yeah, I have a lot of more recent connection with it because when I was a student, I was a student at Sonoma State and I graduated in 2019, and I didn't really participate in a lot of stuff. And so that now it's like, now that I'm working in housing and working in outreach, I'm really like pushing them as much as I can because I am like, where was I? What was I doing? You know, why did I not participate in this stuff? But it's similar to what other speakers have said. You have to meet people where they're at. Sometimes, like, even if someone's like, oh, I need to make friends, they don't necessarily want to go to your ice cream event. So they want to go to your something else event, you know, so you have to figure out stuff like that, sort of what people need, and just offering as much as you can. Is sort of like leading horses to water. Like you cannot force them to drink the water. So, but maybe there's something wrong with the water, you know? So it's like, okay, maybe my thing didn't work today. I'll do something different next time, you know? And now I'm visiting a lot of high schools and stuff and talking about certain events. And so now I don't know, it's just sort of in general, it's pretty not like vague, but it's very open-ended. So you can really do it differently for each student. So it's a nice thing. And Sonoma State offers a bunch of different things too for continuing students, for new students, even prospective students. There's a lot of things you can do and just visiting the campus to participate in the program. So that's some nice things we offer at the school specifically.
And down to the other end of the spectrum there, Ibis, tell us about your connections.
Yeah, so over at the First Five Center, again, we're a family resource center for moms, dads, grandparents, and any caregiver for a little one age 0 to 5. And it's a place to connect with each other, learn, and get access to community resources, whether you're a first-time mom or maybe this is your second, third child, but it's a different child. Every child is a whole different set of behavior, a whole different skills, whole different personality. So we're there for everyone. Also, some moms that are starting over, you know, I include myself in that. Sometimes I see the really cool strollers that are coming through that I didn't have back 12 years ago. So we're there for resource for everyone. You can connect. We have a dads group for just dads. We have the Village, our African-American support group. We have our Tiempo de Té group for Spanish-speaking moms. So it's just a lot focused on what the parent might be needing at the moment. But once you are providing all of those resources to the parent, it's trickling down to the little one and getting them ready for preschool.
Thank you. All right, now I'd like to just kind of throw out some questions to the group. So please jump in with the ones that speak to you. First question is just, how can a parent identify the best type of program for their individual child? You know, there's large classes, small group, one-on-one, you know, after school weekends. Like what are the best ways for parents to figure out for their personal kids?
Well, I think you know who your child is, and you get to know who your child is. And if they're a super extroverted student, maybe a big class is great. If they're a really introverted student or a quiet kid, maybe a smaller group would be better. You know, they may fit better into a charter school environment, depending on if there's a specific emphasis in a charter school. I used to teach at a charter school, and we had an arts focus, and with a degree, I have a master's degree in education, but I also have a degree in theater. So it was perfect for me to teach in that environment and foster those sort of things for students. So parents would often choose that school because there was a specific arts bent to that school. So I think it's really knowing your child and having conversations with the teacher about who your child is in a classroom, which may be different than who your child is at home, and really getting a sense of what they fit into. And, you know, if there's something they love, if they love sports, if they love theater, if they love art, if they love sculpting, whatever, foster that love. It makes school more fun if they can do those things too.
I see Ibri says your hand raised.
Yeah, and if you have a little one and you're not entirely sure of what their personality is or how they might be in a school setting, over with us, if they're 0 to 5, they're mommy and me classes, daddy and me classes. So you'll get to see them in a school setting, but you're there to guide them through any difficult situation, whether there's a conflict about sharing a toy or whether it's bathroom time. You know, if they're ready for preschool or you think they're ready for preschool, do they know how to pull up their pants or tie their shoe or zip up their jacket when it's recess time? So if you're not sure and you have a little one, the mommy and me classes or daddy and me classes give you a glimpse of how your child might be in the school setting.
Natalie, you mentioned your children all had kind of different journeys there in school. How did you navigate helping them in choose programming and activities?
I probably didn't do the best job, I will say. I think that especially around some things like choosing the right middle school configuration, like a small self-contained or a large comprehensive. I think that I tried to listen to their feedback back to me. So I've made some missteps and really tried to like listen to if they started to dislike school or to have some resistance to things, like what does that mean and how do I make adjustments? And so I think being okay being wrong, that you made a choice and you need to make some switches along the way has made a big difference. And I just want to like double down on the idea of like trying it out, like try out different things if you're not quite sure. Because Barbara's points around who your baby is at home and who they are at school can often look really different. And that seems surprising. I would go to a parent conference and think, are you talking about my child? Because that's not how they show up at home in our family configuration. And so like being open to that difference and not assuming that they translate over some of the same social behaviors or other things. And so, yeah, I think keeping an eye on, I love you, Bree's, of go with them when they're little and like watch them in these places because you'll have to get glimpses into it. Craig, I know you have your hand up too, so I want to make sure you get to jump in here.
Sure. Yeah. And to build upon what Barbara and Natalie were saying, you know, it's about knowing your child and talking about the academic journey. And let's say from the high schools to the colleges is being able to go to those college campuses and, you know, setting foot on those college campuses to see, do I see myself here? Case in point example, I've got twins, and for my daughter, I probably could have told you that I think my son would be better suited at a small school, but when we toured some larger schools for my daughter, of which my son went along, within 15 minutes, he knew he didn't want these types of schools, not because they weren't good academic institutions. He just wanted a smaller environment. So that was confirmed by us setting foot on these campuses. So the more you can associate and connect and get onto college campuses and ask yourself, do I see myself being here? I think is important as well.
And Craig, my daughter, she goes to University of Washington, and the day she visited, she's like, yep, I'm coming here. I was like, why would you choose this random school? We're in California, we have so many schools, but she just knew when she got on campus that was the place. And so I just want to like double down and co-sign that. I think it's really important if you can to get there and visit, because it feels once you're on there, you feel it and it's different.
Yeah. And I know it's easier said than done, right? But if you can, like you said, if you can get on any college campuses, whether it be in California, a Cal State, a UC, a community college, or independent college, do so.
On the other end of that spectrum, what are some of the best things parents can do pre-kindergarten, birth to kindergarten, to prepare their children for success in school?
I have to unmute as quickly as possible. Super excited about this one. Yeah, parents are their child's first teacher, and children learn through play. So there are many times in the day that can be turned into learning and bonding moments. We encourage parents to follow their child's lead. And in our classes, we give examples of how children can learn and explore with items that are already in the home. When they play, children learn how to get along with others and experiment and solve problems. So again, the learning through play is what's really going to help them out. Also with their speech, talking, reading, and singing. Those 3 simple free things can help prepare your child for school. There's also the 5 areas of development that you want to make sure you're offering activities at every age. Every child needs those 5 areas: the gross motor, fine motor skills, problem solving, speech, and socialization. So as long as you're giving them activities that are going to help them with those areas, then they're going to be ready for preschool. And yes, you can focus on the, counting up to 30 and the colors and the shapes, but remember, they're going to learn that in school. So if they are playing around in the playground and they are, learning to problem solve, those are even more important because their colors and their shapes are going to review and learn all of those already in the school.
we have started some new programming here at Go called College Early and Often, where we're beginning college exploration and career exploration even when they're in kindergarten on up. Many of our young people came from Ibris's programs, and they have this pure joy and curiosity of learning. And so one, you all are doing great work at the First Five Center. You already know that, but like watching it stay with them as they get older, because the bulk of our cohort we met through you. And each time we come, they're like, what are we going to do? How do I learn? I'm excited. Are we going to do art? Like they're so engaged and curious. And so it comes from championing that when they're little, and them seeing even a late night, a 5 p.m. when it's raining outside activity as a cool opportunity to do a really fun thing. It's just exciting to me. And so I think what you guys do is a secret sauce to how do we have just compelled, excited learners coming up through our K-12 system.
I also taught Montessori way back in the day too. And some of what Ibris is mentioning is very similar to Montessori, where they had little, in the toddler room, they had little trays with, you know, a cup of water that they would pour, and the smallest things like that. It's a learning tool, and it's great for boys and girls to do things that are not, you know, traditionally gender based. It should be everybody doing everything, in my opinion, at that age. So really good learning happening from 0 to 5, a lot.
I know I'm speaking from the college level, but I think it could apply down to that younger kid level. And I appreciate you guys saying this, because in my time of, at least at St. Mary's, I've been on the academic side of the house as well as the recruitment and enrollment side of the house. And one thing I've learned is students need to be resourceful and ask questions, right? So those skills can be taught at a young age, and you can cultivate those skills and continue those skills on up through your college years, you're going to be okay. Right. And that's not always an easy thing for people and students to do, is be resourceful and ask questions. And yes, I'm going to go with the old cliche that the only dumb question is the one that's not asked, right? But it's so true. And I can't emphasize that enough as we teach them at a younger age, but as they move through the school systems and into college, to continue asking those questions.
I would just, or sorry, I'll chime in really fast. I would just sort of echo what Natalie was saying in the last question of being really open. And I don't really work with little children, so I don't know a lot about very specific, like being a parent, but it's very important, I think, to just be open and to try new things with different kids, because if you have multiple children, especially, or you know, just your own child, it might be I'm thinking like of working with my own parents on different stuff, even at very young ages. It's very, you're doing it for a lot of things for the first time, even with the even if it's like your second child. Like my mom was always doing new things with my sister versus me, you know? So yeah, just doing your best and not being too hard on yourself if you get something wrong.
Yeah, and then even also just a little bit more in depth when it comes to asking questions and how to teach them that skill. The way you ask them your questions, not just yes or no questions, but open-ended questions, is what's going to teach them the difference on, you know, getting just a one plain answer from a resource, or getting like a whole bunch of avenues to whatever they're asking. So if you are asking them open-ended questions, they're going to learn how to ask those. And when they're up in the college level, that's what they'll be asking.
Shifting now to like, well, when they're in school, how should families balance the demands of schoolwork with their desire for enrichment or to accelerate their children's learning? Like what is the balance there?
I think a lot about this question. I often had families who booked their kids, and they were doing lots of enrichment and or intervention and both. And as a school leader, they came back to me in the morning pretty exhausted and zonked because they had been going all day. Molly, I also would love for you to answer this question from your educator hat, because you're in the trenches more every day than we are. But I think there's just something about honoring downtime and allowing kids to breathe, and believe that there is time. Like there's a lot of time for kids to come into things. I think we have this fear that our children need to be so competitive that they'll be at the very top of the heap all the time. And that just isn't always true in the world that we're in. And so how do we ourselves model a little bit of patience and slowing down? And there's so much power in like having dinner together as a family a night or two a week if you can, like those rituals and rhythms that will be just as enriching for your child as some of the other things that we do that are out in classes and clubs and other things. So as a mom right now, I'm doing a lot of reflection on what does that look like for me and my family, but I think there's something around you can do too much. And so how are we really thoughtful about where to not overexhaust our kiddos? Because we don't want to work a full day of work and then do a second full day of work and then a third full day of work. And essentially we're giving them their job over and over again if we continue to over enrich them, in my opinion.
Just to jump a little bit on what Natalie is mentioning, for little ones, it's okay if they get bored. That's when their best ideas come. That's when their imagination and exploration will happen. It's okay if they don't have an activity that you set up for them, because their wheels will start turning to keep themselves entertained.
Well, and I think with Kyle and I being admissions professionals, right, and leading into college admissions, smiling as you're asking the question, Molly, because completely aware of how our kids are structured and scheduled, right? And you think of sports. I think about when I played sports. You played sports in a season. You didn't play sports year round. So, you know, these kids, and I'm also very aware of the stresses that are assigned with the college admissions process. I also understand why they exist, but I completely disagree as to why they happen, right? And so I try to push back against them for those things, like students who feel like that they have to be involved in 25 things just because that's the school, what the school wants to see them do. And I often talk about, if you're like focused on accelerating and being passionate maybe about one thing, and if that's something that you're passionate about, you do well, that's okay, right? Rather than this aura of existing that we have to do X, Y, Z just because.
I would say similar things. Not every I'm thinking like not every club is going to benefit the student. Even like I would just always say do what make as much time as you can for students to do what they enjoy the most or what seems to benefit them. Even a lot of like homework assignments are not always going to benefit the student, you know what I mean? And so I mean I'd still say do your homework, I guess, but don't like spend too much time on certain things. Don't like try to get them to do as much fun things as they can, but also like really doing what benefits them the most. So if like, you know, it helps them to learn those lessons, it helps them to have fun and try to have a good balance of everything. It's sort of like an impossible task to balance everything, but trying to balance like homework with clubs and sports and all that. And it's also like good to take a break if you need to, you know.
And I think the comments you guys were making earlier about, you know, each kid being different also applies here as well. I'll say even with my two kids, you know, they have a lot in common. They're the same age, but one of them is like, sign me up for everything. You know, they want to join every club at school. They want to do that. And one for sure, when they get too many things, like, I just want some downtime at home. And they'll say that. And so I have to learn to listen to that because I'm like a schedule everything type of a person for myself. And that's definitely not what, you know, one of my kids is as a person, and like they definitely thrive more with more downtime there to just decompress and think and imagine and all of that. Related to this, you know, there was the panel earlier today about athletics and the arts. If a child is struggling in school, should they stop doing these kind of extracurricular activities so they can focus on school? What do you think? Whether it's our intervention folks or our college admissions folks here, what's the choice to make there?
Well, I get this question all the time. Sorry. Because we're all about getting these kids ahead and getting them up to par and up to snuff academically, etc. And then I get parents saying, well, he has soccer. I mean, I don't want to take soccer away from him. And actually, I don't want to take soccer away from him either, or theater or anything. I think that's a hugely important component of a child's life and something they enjoy. And if you take that away, it just makes reading more difficult or something they don't like. We try to be as flexible as we can so that the kid could have it all. I know it's important, really, really important to be reading at level and have your mathematics at par as well. You're certainly going to feel more confident about yourself as a learner, and mom and dad could rest a little bit more as well, or parent, grandparent, whomever. But I fully feel like a child should be as well-rounded as possible and have some say in their own life's journey. And that includes some enjoyment activities. So as somebody who deals with intervention every day, I would want to do the best to have it all as much as possible.
I also think that they learn some lessons there in those activities. We just have to help them now challenge them or put them into perspective at school. So if you have a sport that you play, now let's and sports or drama club or whatever activity that you're doing, there's a lesson there and a skill that is learned there that now you can apply in school to then help you be successful there. So there's lessons there as well. So it's not just, we keep saying it's the fun activity, but there's also skills and lessons that they get from it.
I've seen quite often too that coaches and drama teachers and other folks are often very encouraging of academic progress. And so they become this touch point. So you don't have to do it alone. They're also in your corner cheering on academic proficiency. And for secondary students who need to be eligible to play, it actually can be the motivator to keep going in school because you need to keep your eligibility. If you take it away, then you lose the actual kind of the angle of the carrot to encourage to go. And I just say to myself, like, I hate the admin tasks in my job. Time sheets, counting, I hate it. If my whole day was just that, I would really hate my job. And so for a student, if reading is really hard or math is really hard, and then their whole day becomes just that and not the part that they really love and brings them joy, they just continue to lose motivation around the other parts. And so we have to provide joy and relief. And especially in athletics, I have seen so many coaches who have become essentially academic mentors to students. They're on campus, they see them at school, they nudge them when they're goofing around, and so leverage the extra support that can come from it. But I think Kyle had said before, and maybe Craig, like, you don't have to do all of them. You can pick the one that you're doing well at. So maybe you say, what's the one you really care about? We'll focus on that to give you more time. So if they're currently doing 6 things and struggling in school, you might want to peel back a couple to make a little more room just for space. Because it may be that the too many things is part of the challenge academically. It's creating just an overflood of activities. So choose the one they love the most and make sure you preserve it if you can, and then work around it would be my secondary recommendation on that.
Yeah, thank you, Nat, because like you said, is it okay to encourage them to pull back and not do certain things? And I think that's when we or the student or child recognizes a certain strength, it's okay to have or a passion, it's okay to focus in that area. Yes, still be well-rounded, but don't, overextend oneself just because of an impression. And kind of relating it to athletics, I was a college athlete myself, and I still talk with, I am connected to the athletic process here at St. Mary's, but I'm also seeing that, for example, this is just my guesstimation. I feel like this generation of kids and college students are healthier in their approach to athletics, maybe because that you can play them year round. So you might recognize earlier what you might be tired of or what you might get burned out of. And that extends to that college process, where I think I existed in a generation where that had to be the identifier to define someone in college. And I think I see kids making healthier choices, that these things like athletics, they don't have to necessarily define your existence at the college setting. And I think that's healthy.
I would definitely agree with the other panelists. I think it's definitely, it's very person to person, each student's gonna have their own experience. I think there's a lot of quick to, if a student is struggling, they must quit the extracurricular activities. But there's a lot of times, like, the classes might be struggling with that. Like, if they can get accommodations or some kind of changed learning plan, it is not always possible at every school, but I would always say to look for those if they can. But also sort of similar, on the flip side, not like music is not for every kid. So if they're like in all these things and it sounded fun and they wanted to do it, but they really don't like it in the end, it's okay. Like, some kids really do like the exams, So I think it's like, I don't know, just figuring out what's good for that child, which I think I would usually always suggest, like, doing what they love, like the extracurriculars, but it's not for every child. So really, like, I think it's okay to choose, like, if your student is unique or has their own plan, it's okay too.
building on that, for those of you who do, programming with students, how do you support a child when they're like forced to be there by their parent? They're at an academic enrichment or intervention, but they were not the ones who elected themselves there.
That's always fun, isn't it? We love it when the kid hates to come to Sylvan. Well, we do have a motivation program at Sylvan where we really train the teachers and work hard to incentivize students to enjoy being there as much as they possibly can. And part of the motivation of coming and part of our motivation system in which we give, small points and things like that for working really hard and all of that is not only to foster a really strong work ethic, but also to show appreciation for the effort that they are actually making while they are there. Sometimes we tell kids, look, we come to work and we enjoy work sometimes, and sometimes we don't, but we come and we get paid for it generally. This is kind of your little payment for doing something outside of school and doing it really well. And here are the behaviors that you are showing that is going to really get you far in academics, in life, etc. So we try to foster those things, but we can only do so much. So it's sometimes it's a hard one. So that's why we really don't want to take away, their art class or soccer or football or whatever it is they want. That we want to work with the parent to make sure that the kid can have it all, so that we don't have such a resistance. We don't want reading and math to feel crummy. We want reading and math to feel as fun as it possibly can. So we do a lot of training with our teachers around that piece, because it's not only good academically, but it's also good for the students' motivation and confidence in the end. So.
Kyle, I want to come back to a thing that you said that I thought was sheer brilliance and important to put an exclamation point on, which is that a kid may love a thing and then not love it, and then you don't notice that they changed. My son loved baseball, loved baseball when he was little, really good at it, shined. But then he hit middle school and some kids grew really fast and he was a late grower. So he was playing on a team with like grown men, and then he was still, 4'7". And so the dynamic changed really quickly. And so he didn't like it, but he thought that his dad and I liked it so much that he had to keep playing because it had become like a family thing. His dad coached with him, and me, I was less invested because it was every weekend, took a lot of time. But he played a whole nother year like miserable because he thought like it was what the family had to do. And so how are you willing to let your kid change year over year? Because it may be a thing that fed them that they adored suddenly doesn't. And how are you as a parent not so overly invested in their success? I've seen a lot of parents get really invested in their children's programs that it becomes their kind of social scene and way to be. And then their children get forced to stay into it. And so I think there's something about checking in. Is it each year? Is it every quarter? Is it each time you renew a class and say, does this still inspire you the same way it did when we started? And if not, that's just okay. Because children actually read their parents' energy and want to make them happy. And so there's an interesting relationship there with those pieces. Don't assume if your child liked the flute. My daughter, when she was in 4th grade, said she wanted to go and play flute at Cal when she was in college. The flute was gone by 10th grade. We had moved on emotionally. So like, how do we let them grow out of things over time and not overcommit them? Because then you end up by accident pushing them into a thing that they hate. And I do just want to also double down. I think that Sylvan does really powerful motivation systems to try and make it fun and joyful. So a kiddo has the extra hour in the tank to want to keep learning. We see it in our schools. We're trying to do it more and more all the time. But I think actually asking your kid where they're at can go really far.
I would agree with that. I think Natalie brings up a lot of good points. I think when your parents are chiming in and checking in with you is really important. Because your opinion changes a lot. Sometimes, I'm thinking that sounds similar to me. Like my family's very musical, and I do love music and I still participate in it, but I didn't love band. And so that was something I did for many years, which but I had the idea in my mind that I had to do it for the family. But realizing like years later, I really think my parents would have been okay had I quit band. And so I think it's like, that's important to check in with your students. And I could talk forever and ever about my own experience, but checking in with your student is always important. I think a lot of times when I'm at these college fairs, I'm talking to a really excited parent, and then the child is like a statue in the back. And so it's sometimes, the parent is like, yeah, he's really excited for this. And I'm like, no, he's not. But like he might just not be expressing that. So I think it's also it's not a bad thing to like encourage your child, or not force them, but like really push their hand a little bit to tell them things. Because I'm thinking, like, as a child, I would not have come to college, honestly, if my parents did not force me to apply or whatever. And I'm really grateful for them for that. And I mean, they weren't like abusive forcing, but like they like really helped me with that, you know what I mean? So I guess I'm not really saying that very well, but finding that balance I think is important, because sometimes you need to like push your child in a certain way that would really benefit them, but finding that balance so it doesn't hurt them also, because you really don't want that overall. And so really just checking in with your student and figuring out what works for them, and helping them do that.
Yeah, and sometimes finding the right skill or the right words to say to your little one could be difficult. Over at the First Five Center, we have the parenting classes. Some are evidence-based, the nurturing parents class, the triple P class, circle of security. But in there's a technique where it's, and just to use a little bit of Natalie's example, yes, mom and dad do love baseball, and it's okay that you join a reading club or a reading book club. So, changing that but to an and are some of the tips that we might not have on our back pocket already on our toolbox, but there's parenting classes over at our center that can, might make some things that you might be going through, give you that skill as well as a parent. Switching that but to an and.
One other type of academic enrichment program that's been kind of growing a lot recently are these dual enrollment or concurrent enrollment, where you're taking college classes in high school or middle school. And I was just wondering, we've got, especially from our college folks here or people with high school background, what are your thoughts on those opportunities?
I think they can be really helpful. I mean, it depends. Again, every question is like, everything is specific to your child, but it really is accurate. I think it's tough because sometimes you come in and you see students really burned out. And so that is the negative aspect of it. Like high school is really difficult on its own. And then adding on a whole, like some people are coming in with their AA degree senior year, it's like, oh, like when are you, taking naps? I don't know. They're very busy. But some students that really does work for them, like they like being busy and they like working. So I think, if you find that your student is struggling, if you find that if you're the student and you find that you are struggling, I think maybe try to take a step back, because you can do all those things in college. Like there's always time. Like there's students in college who are 30 years old and they're still, making a lot of money and having friends, and there's still very positive things. So that's not going to happen to every student, pursuing college at a later time. But you don't have to get everything done today. So I would say, don't feel like you have to do those programs. But if that is something, like some students really love the academics. So if you're in that situation, pursue every academic you can. But really just like, don't push yourself to do something that would hurt you. Just try to find what works best for you and pushes you to greater things, not harder things.
Yeah, and as being a transfer person, I see it a lot. The dual enrollment, the middle college, and I actually just for the first time in many years, because of staffing, had to step out and go on the road and do high school fairs and high school visits this fall, and dual enrollment came up a lot. I think it's great, but kind of to Kyle's point, I think what's important is to find out the reasoning for why the student's doing it, right? Again, if it's a just because they feel like that's what they need to do to be a well-rounded person for the college admission process, that might not be the right reason, right? I know some student that might be an economical decision. Some people say, hey, I might do this so I can only, it takes me 3 years to navigate from college. And to Kyle's point too, and as someone who works with transfer students, yeah, it's okay if it takes longer than 4 years. It's okay if it takes longer than 5 years. Like we live in a world now, we're gone are the days that there's this stigma around, how long it takes one to graduate from college, because education is always there to finish, right? So yeah, I think if students are doing it for the right reasons, it's great. I encourage it. Some people just want to do it for the enrichment and the experience of taking a college class. That's great. Sometimes, like I said, it's economical, and some people want to speed up the process. But I feel if they're really choosing it for the right reasons, then it's a healthy thing. I'll just share something really quick. I did see it once from many years ago when I was on the academic side of the house, in an environment in the Pacific Northwest where it's very common, running start. And the student's reasoning for doing so was to get in and out in 2 years so she could start law school. And my thought process was, and it was culturally driven, right? But as I was talking with the student, I wasn't convinced that it was the healthiest route for her, because my thought process was, there's one thing to enter law school at age 22 or 23, and there's one thing to enter college or law school at age 20, right? So because she was her goal was to get to law schools as quick as possible, is why she did it. And I didn't actually agree with her reasoning why, but she did it. And I don't know what ended up happening, but she was able to navigate through our college in 2 years. Maybe she went on to law school and it was successful. But I also did have some questions, like, was she mature enough to hit law school at age 20, let's say?
I definitely have some wonderings. We've had a lot of families who try and do math acceleration in the middle school. And I have some just like developmental questions around frontal lobe development. There's a lot of thinking around algebra and the frontal lobe and it not being fully developed until 13, 14. And so if we're asking our 11 and 12-year-olds to not only be accelerated, but be on a college campus with acceleration, I think there's something about that. And if they do not do well, I think taking that hit of a D or an F can be really like soul crushing. If that's how you now vision yourself as a college going student and you're 12 and you fail at your first college experience. And so I know that a lot of families have this really extreme urgency to like get ahead and be at the top. And there is like science to how our minds can hold abstract math and other things, and not everyone develops at the same pace. And so I think as I'm thinking about that, but then for Kyle and Craig, what does that D or F do? So if my kid takes geometry at Contra Costa College in 8th grade and they fail, they have an F now sitting on a college transcript. What does that do for their future journey when they're coming out of high school?
I would say for a lot of the students, usually even if students are taking college in classes, at least at Sonoma State, and they are applying to college after, they're still considered first-time freshman students. So that can be a benefit sometimes. It's different for every student, but no, most of the time they can still come in as a freshman student. I mean, and even if students have failed grades, a lot of times like middle school grades are not taken into account. They can affect your high school grades, but usually like our GPA, for example, is 10 through 12 is what we look at. So it's like maybe someone did really poorly their first year, and luckily that's not being considered. But I mean, I would say it's not the end of the world if that is your situation, of course. But it's a sort of a case by case, like admissions has to go over what's transferable. Because sometimes even if you get a C, even if it feels like heartbreaking to get a C or whatever, that's still transferable. So just making sure you're keeping an open mind and also looking at different schools, because there's 23 CSUs, and so there's a lot of things that are universal, but there's a lot of different things at each one as well.
I'll come about it from two perspectives. One being a transfer student. The beauty about transfer students is you get to reinvent yourself, right? That's a reinventing process a lot of times for students, right? So retaking classes, right, is a way to do that. I'd also say from the other standpoint, a high school student, let's say, taking geometry. I mean, so for us, that's one of the minimum math requirements, right? But if a student took that and got a D in it, we view taking concurrent dual enrollment college courses as a weighted course. So theoretically, a D might be a C because, like AP or IB or honors, we associate college level courses taken in high school to be kind of a higher level perspective.
Super interesting. I did not know that. Very helpful, Craig. Thank you.
All right, I think it's time we can turn to some questions from the audience. And let's see, I've gotten a few over here already. One we have specifically for Barbara, just asking if Sylvan incorporates any of that Montessori teaching. You said you have a Montessori background. We know you're at Sylvan. Do you get to bring any of those pieces together in your work?
I did answer this one. It's a little tricky because Montessori is very, very hands-on. And Sylvan is very, very skills-based. So I think my answer to that question is really in about the teaching methodology and really working hard to motivate, encourage, and increase confidence with our students, which is exactly what Montessori does as well. But the teaching methodologies are very, very different. So even though I have a background in, some Montessori teaching, it's not really correlative to Sylvan.
Yeah, that totally makes sense.
Yeah.
All right, we'll go to a few more questions. And audience out there, there's the Q&A feature at the bottom of the screen where you can type in some more questions. So don't hold back. Another question for kind of any of you in different programs that you support, just people wondering about what supports you have for English language learners, multilingual learners, in terms of kinds of enrichment or supports that we've been talking about.
I think one quick thing is that I think a lot of students might see it as a disadvantage if they're struggling with a language, but that's a really invaluable skill to be learning multiple languages. So I would say look at that as I'm a hard worker or whatever, but I only know that one language. And so I would say if you're a student who's speaking another language and you're learning English, that I would say look at that as like you're a very hard worker and you're doing a lot of difficult things. So I would just keep an open mind about that, because sometimes it can be easy to think, oh, I'm struggling with English, I'm a bad student, whatever. But that's a really good skill and everything to have. So I would say just pat yourself on the back and then go through the programs.
I think also sometimes the goal of the parent or the priority, because they already have a first language, their first language, then their goal is to learn the English. So then they pass that on to their little one to learn the English. But if you already have, the language from your home country, we encourage you to teach that one first. Let that one be the base for your little one, because again, the English will come in school. The English will come on their day-to-day life if they're living, here. But if you have a language from your home country, we encourage to, if possible, just speak that one to your child. And to you, it might look like they are struggling once the English get introduced. But if they're little ones, ages 0 to 5, their brains are like sponges. So they'll be able to pick up both of them as well. And as long as they have that base with that second language, it'll get easier to switch back and forth between them.
Well, we at Sylvan try as much as possible when we're working in schools, as we're doing in Ford and Lincoln right now, with especially students who are emergent readers who are ELL, particularly Hispanic, and hiring Spanish-speaking teachers who could actually do some translation. And even though the goal is to teach English, the goal is to make sure the student understands. So Spanish and Latin-based languages, they're very easy phonetically. English is very complicated phonetically. So if we could have a teacher in their home language, and it's not easy to find. I mean, it's not always easy to find that teacher, but we do our best so that they can really explain things in that home language, which for us is particularly Spanish. The kids, we really see acceleration in the English for the students. So to your point, we really, it's phenomenal and fantastic to be bilingual. I think it's fantastic. One day I would love for Sylvan to kind of partner with Escuelita, I think it's Escuelita, to teach dual immersion Spanish. So we get a lot of calls for, can you teach Spanish language to our students? So that's something I'd like to do at one point. So
I think along with Idris's reflections is looking at, I've had parents shy away from like reading at home with their kiddos because they read in their home language, and literacy is literacy is literacy. And so like, do it often. You will always be winning if you are reading in your home language. Your child will grow, their brain will flourish. And so how to really kind of champion that along the way and not have hesitation around it. And I think one of the largest things that has really changed over my time in education is there used to be a theory of don't teach really challenging academics until students have caught up in English. And that has really pivoted over the last years to say, teach really rigorous, highly complicated content, and it will come scaffolded and supported and add in supports, but don't hold back on the deep thinking, because the students have all the capacity for the rigor and the challenge, and they actually will learn it in context along the way. Speaking of those beautiful spongy minds. And so I think just for any educators who are listening, you don't hold back on the good stuff till they catch up, or else the gap just actually keeps widening. In fact, you keep teaching high rigor while students are acquiring English as their academic language, so that they're able to navigate, but both can be true at the same time, which is really a pivot from methodologies back in the older days when I first started in the field.
All right, we have a question for Craig and Kyle. At the college level, what is in place at your institution to support students with special needs or learning differences? At the college level, we know a lot about it, at middle and high school, elementary, but what happens when they get out of high school?
Yeah, I'll jump into that. I literally was just talking, I'm here at the college, I'm kind of overseeing our student ambassadors day, sort of giving tours, and I just talked with us about a family today is, and I think Kyle will say this as well, we have a student disability services center. I can't express enough for students to carry over any documentation that they have to the college level. And I say that because I've met, from my counseling background, if someone goes there, it's okay to go there. So I've had many of students who've been in my office who have maybe talked about their own learning difference, but then maybe were too prideful to submit documentation because they felt like they were fine. And I still tell that student, you still provide that documentation. The ball's in your court whether you choose to use those services or not. But if the documentation's not there, they can't adequately support you, right? So if there are learning differences and there's documentation, whether it's IEPs or 504s in the school system, carry that documentation over to the college level, because that sets the tone for them to be able to provide those services. And those services don't stigmatize students. So please utilize those services. And then the last thing I'll mention, and I'll let Kyle jump into, is I was telling a family this morning, for St. Mary's, for example, you don't have to wait to be an admitted student to start asking those questions, right? So you can contact those departments when you're in high school, or if you're inquiring about a college, start asking those questions, because it can at least get me familiar with maybe what types of services they can provide to address the specific learning differences.
Yeah, I mean, I would definitely say, definitely ask for help if you're not sure. Like, I think a lot of college, if you're looking for colleges, it can be very intimidating. There's a lot of overwhelming information because every school is like a city, so every college has like all this information, but I'm like at Sonoma State specifically, we have DSS, Disability Services for Students. And there's going to be something like that at every CSU, every private college, every UC. Usually there's some kind of program to help students, but Sonoma State has a lot of different things we offer for students. I would definitely agree with Craig. It's like good to reach out and ask with questions. Like we have things like you can get someone to take notes for you, or we can have someone, or you can bring if you have like a service animal or emotional support animal, if you want to live on campus, you can get that approved and get the dog to live in the house with you, for example, or whatever kind of animal it might be. But yeah, I would say definitely just feel open about it. There's a lot of like obstacles to like points in education, as we always talk about, but there's a lot of people to help you, and there's a lot of people whose job it is to help you specifically with those accommodations and stuff. So feel free to reach out to them. A lot of people are very happy to help you with any kind of questions you have, or helping you actually get started with that process once you become a student.
Thank you. Kind of pivoting for a last question for all of you would just be, is there something that you wish that I had asked you, or something that you want our audience to know, related to the big topics we've been talking about today? Natalie, I'll put you on the spot to go first.
You saw my face. I think I want to echo Idris in saying play is really important, even when they're 16, 17, 18, or 21. I think we think as they get older, they need it less and they have to be like overbooked or like, you're a big person now, get focused. And downtime and boredom are really important even for our bigger kids. And so how do we continue to help them champion that skill in themselves, but not every moment needs to be filled. I think watching my big two who are now sophomores and seniors in college, as they navigate their universe, they didn't do all the things and they are just fine. They are successful. They found the right fit college for them. They don't go to an Ivy League school and they are thriving and learning. Like they chose the fit that matches them. You know, my son wanted to go somewhere in the middle of nowhere. And so he goes to Oregon State and gets to fly fishing camp every weekend. And like, he loves it. And so don't like think every baby has to go to Harvard to have that equate success in their life. It doesn't always match their interests. And I think not every kid has to go to college at all. And I think that's the other part of the journey, that there are lots of pathways in and around. You know, Kyle didn't want to go and he ended up going. He's glad he went, but like there are lots of pathways. And so for my youngest, his journey is going to look different. And so I think, how are we passionate about academics, but how are we more passionate about curiosity and love of learning? Those are like the life skills that carry with you, more so than if you've checked boxes and kind of crunched the numbers. And that can feel hard to be in a society that has a lot of pressure around college attainment being the only successful pathway. And so really wanting to continue to open more doors to lots of meaningful life paths are out there. And I just want to echo Craig that college will always be there. So you can come back when you're a little bit later on the journey and you figured out what you actually want to do, and it will still be waiting for you. It doesn't have to happen when you're, for many kids, 17 and leaving high school. You don't have to have it all figured out yet. So I think that's like my soapbox mom / educator moment is, it's okay if they don't know when they're 17. They have lots of life to figure it out.
For me, it would be every moment of your day-to-day is a learning opportunity. Yes, for the little ones, because everything in the world is new to them, but also for your teens, you know, whatever you are going, whatever you're thinking about as you're driving home, say it out loud. Yeah, it might sound like you're speaking to yourself, but trust me, your teenager next to you is listening and is seeing how you are processing your day-to-day, and they'll start to do the same thing or pick up that skill so that they can apply it to their day-to-day life as well when you are not there, when they are off to college. Like, oh, okay, my mom used to, you know, say her schedule in her mind, so let me say my schedule in my mind as I'm sitting here eating breakfast. So every opportunity, every moment in the day-to-day life can be a learning opportunity for both your little one and your teenagers. Please speak up about what you're thinking, because chances are that they're probably going to use that thought process as well. And also when you want them to speak back to you, they'll know how to do it because they'll be able to put what's going on in their minds into words.
And I don't think I could have said it any better than Natalie did, but what I will say along with that is the entire life cycle is education, right? It doesn't just have to be about school. And so what I mean by that too is I know in my career, I've met plenty of transfer students who have come into my office and have apologized for their journey. Meaning maybe they went, and I'll just create like a situation. Maybe a student went to a community college for 2 years, then decided to travel for the world for a year, then decided to get a job, and then decided they wanted to go to a 4-year college and finish their educational process. And it's going to take them 22 or 3 years, and they're going to be 28. There's no apologies needed for that. Studying abroad and travel the world, that's education in and of itself, right? Going out to the professional world, that's education in and of itself. So I think knowing how we define education as being that lifelong process is important too.
And I thought all the questions were great, but my only like final statement would be, I would say like keep an open mind about all the different options you have, which is sort of what we've been talking about already. But a lot of times, like I think like in Northern California, it's like there's Stanford and Davis, and those are the colleges. But there's so many other colleges. Like a lot of people have not even heard of Sonoma State, but it's there's 23 schools, which, you know, most people cannot even name them all. And these are, I think a lot of times it's hard when you're in high school and like you want to go to a cool, like you need like a, you know, the popular choice, but which is great if like UC Davis or Stanford is good for you. But I'm just saying there's a lot of other options as well. Like if you go to all these schools, there's hundreds of people, there's thousands of students, working there and going there. So I would just say, think of all your options, visit everywhere, visit locally, travel if you can. There's always different kinds of things that can work for you, no matter what kind of student you are.